Hello and welcome to Kemet Capital, community of holders and seekers of African capital. I'm your host, JS, and before we begin, guys, you already know we start with our word of affirmation. Our guiding principle is to curb and Douglas function. On our way to make Africa great again is through economic power, economic might, and in order for us to achieve that, guys, we need to produce more in a more efficient way. So today we're going to react to this video that pertains to the total factor of productivity, which is the change in output, not from input. All right, guys, without further ado, let's jump into this video and react as always as we go along.
Trade integration in Africa got a shot in the arm after the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, named Real Sources Africa, a tech-enabled trade facilitation company, as an authorized agent of the Africa Trade Gateway. The appointment follows the signing of an agency agreement. The move is expected to up the ante by connecting African SMEs to continental and global markets. For more on this, I'm now joined live by Felix Chege, CEO of Real Sources Africa. Thank you so much, Mr. Chege, for joining us on the show. And many, of course, would want to know, what does this mean for the small businesses in Africa? What will change going forward?
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. As always, as an introduction, let's discuss a little bit who is Afreximbank. So Afreximbank is the African Export and Import Bank. It was established in 1993. Um, it's a Pan-African multilateral financial institution, and it's owned by African governments and non-African public and private investors. And the entity acts under the Treaty and Charter framework, right? It is headquartered in Cairo, in Egypt, and its main focus is to finance and also facilitate, promote the intra and extra African trade, right? The aim is both trade flows and industrialization, as well as value added export growth. You have to understand, guys, on the continent, intra African trade only accounts for 17% of the trade, which is very minimal compared to, the capability and the capacity of the entire continent. So Afrimex Afreximbank is here to help, alleviate some of those growing pains because, guys, in terms of trade, we need to have institutions like this. So some of the strengths of this bank is that it has deep trade finance experience in Africa, including risk appetite, to serve challenging markets. It's also a strong continental legitimacy. You have close to 53 member states held on a treaty basis, which helps, in accessing capital and being perceived as a preferred, creditor in many deals. They also have a strategic alignment with AFTA, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area, a continental integration and system like PAPSS, which is the Pan African Payment and Settlement Service. So they are very involved into that operation, but also the bank serves as credit risk and non-performing loan exposure. You have exposure to sovereign entity, sovereign countries like Ghana, for example, Zambia and Malawi, and having exposure to those countries also raises the risk of the entity itself. So they have to manage that and make sure that there's no rating downgrades to increase their cost of funding. Because us guys, as African seekers and holders, of African capital, we need entities like this to facilitate intertrade inside the continent. So this is an overview of Afreximbank. I encourage you guys to visit the website, to familiarize yourself with their mission, their values, and also the product offering, because I'm pretty sure they'll be able to, to leverage some of you guys here, holders and seekers of African capital. All right, guys, let's continue.
Much for inviting me to this show. Yes, Africa Trade Gateway is actually an ecosystem that looks at spurring the conversation about the continental free trade area, but from a very practical standpoint. Now, policy work has been done, really appreciated for that. by the AFCFTA Secretariat, but now we're going to a point where transactions need to start counting. And through ATG, rails have been created. And now what we're doing is just bringing in SMEs, bringing in the last mile distributors, aggregators, and retailers to be able to offtake the opportunities that are there within the African market.
And this development comes back on the backdrop of African countries intending to increase intra-Africa trade, which stands at about 17%. What will it symbolize going forward in terms of expanding companies that can access the trading platform, and how much will this contribute towards expanding trade?
See, as you just mentioned, inter-Africa trade, yes, is that it's quite low compared to other kind of continents. But with this, we're looking at fast tracking in terms of the process of identification of opportunities, execution, and basically coming up with proper data that will increase the volume of people participating in the trade. We're looking at being able to accelerate this particular trade to even double it in the next couple of years. And technology is actually meant to fast track the conversation. So we're looking at doubling the trade volume that is currently standing at 17% to maybe a cool 34% in the next couple of maybe 2 to 3 years with this kind of initiative on board.
And looking at the practicality of this agreement, I'd like to know, how will it help African businesses who are trying to tap into new markets that they have historically been unable to get into, and perhaps how does it, of course, help in the long-term growth of intra-Africa trade?
I mean, this is a no-brainer. You just expanded your market, so you have access to a larger customer base. All in all, you'll be more successful. So the intra-African great trade guide is critical for us, but we also have to understand that some of the policies needs to be harmonized. Last week we discussed about the Nigerian, banking and settlement system. So stuff like that, they need to be implemented all over, in every region to facilitate integration. So that's where we start. That's where we start.
You see, one thing that ATG gives is the ability to create demand. I
Hmm.
know there are so many inquiries that are being collected from so many places, but being able to consolidate and create value to these inquiries, convert them to tangible transactions for execution, it's an amazing kind of ability.
Mm.
And on that, the capability to do proper KYC checks. Trade starts from a trust conversation. Through the ATG, KYC is being done to each and every individual being onboarded. So it's basically creating an ecosystem that has credible players in it. Last but not least, the capability to host escrow payment services through this particular ecosystem. When people are able to get demand, get a capability to execute through the payment rails that are there, and including the logistical infrastructure that is there. Basically, these are some of the immediate tools that are being implemented to make sure this conversation is very practical and very tangible.
And when you look at trust and digital payments, these are strange bedfellows. How do you build confidence, especially in a continent where majority of the traders are quite very peculiar lot when it comes to just believing in the payment system, where someone is ordering for goods in Ghana and yet they've perhaps in the past had an incident where they were frisked?
Right, guys. So maybe I didn't put the context in place correctly, right? So this guy, Felix, is the CEO of a Resource Africa is the to business marketplace and trade platform for African small and medium enterprises, right? So it's basically like, an Amazon or a Shopify type of platform. So business to business, you come in here, you have your services, your product, and you're trying to sell it to, other players all across Africa. That's where real resources come from. So Afreximbank, Afreximbank partnered with Real Resources Africa, to increase or to provide a platform for those SMEs to be able to interact or to exchange, within themselves. And the guy is explaining that one of the main elements is the KYC. You have to know your customer. That will build trust. So platforms as such, guys, they need to be going more mainstream. You guys, we need to know those platforms. We need to know resources Africa, because as for us, we're seekers and holders of African capital, we will be using platforms like this to cooperate with other players across Africa. And I also like this initiative because they're pulling resources. Last week or several weeks ago, we talked about how we need to be able to cooperate, to increase the size of the pie so that each slices become bigger for everyone, for each individual entity. So that's what Afreximbank and Real Resources Africa are trying to do right now. And this marketplace, guys, it's very comprehensive. It's very well done. So you have a matchmaking type of offering here. You have they host a marketplace with vendors or suppliers and buyers. The seller lists products, food, beverage, raw materials, manufactured goods with images, specification, and the buyer can browse, send inquiries, get quotes. You also have a verification and trust building. Sellers are verified, as I said, with the KYC, background checks, legal compliance before onboarding. The verified status to help build, the reputation and trust among buyers. Because a platform like that, the real key is the trust. You have to be able to trust the counterparty that you're interacting. Also, you have trade related support like trade financing. They help funding grants, loans, or payment solutions. You have transport and logistic, which is one of the main, the main key element, one of the key element, the trade and logistic, by facilitating physical movement of goods, within the continent. That's not something um, easy to achieve, but they also offer like warehousing, inspection and collateral management, but also insurance. They cover the risk in trade, also damage or loss or delays. And finally, the clearing and forwarding. They handle customs, border paperwork, forward goods to destination. So basically, if you're small enterprises, you may not have the capability, to handle the customs, to handle the paperwork. You don't have that expertise. So through this marketplace, it helps your operation tremendously. Now you can focus on more, value added activities. So Real Sources Africa also provide market intelligence and branding because, as you know, it's a market platform. So they have access to data that they collect through transaction going through their website. So they provide data insight to SMEs, market trends, tariff and tax regimes, climate impact, regulatory info. So all that information help you, be more efficient, helps you in your planning, help you in, the way, you manage your stocks and the way you manage your suppliers, your customers. Also, it helps sellers, build their brand identity, be visible, set their pricing, define minimum order quantities. Stuff like that are customizable through the application. And finally, you have Trade Connect. It's a platform. The platform features like it's a main to further facilitate trade, perhaps like via networking, partnership, and trade missions and so forth. So this is Real Sources Africa.
I think it's all starting with a bank backed, and I'd say a trusted bank backed kind of a platform, which is the ATG itself. And through the ATG, we've been able to host the payment gateway, which is a NESCO payment infrastructure, whereby both buyers and traders, through this gateway, funds can be put in, only released upon order confirmation or upon execution being confirmed. But other than that, Real Sources is one of the partners coming on board to handhold the transaction and really show the value. And the value itself is being able to guarantee an SME that yes, you've placed your order, maybe from Nigeria, expecting it to Kenya, you've made your payment through the escrow gateway, you've received the product down here, and payment can actually be executed. I think the trust that Afreximbank has been able to build over the year is one of the things that we're leveraging to showcase to the entire continent that we have a bank that is willing to secure your
Yeah,
funds as you're getting with the trade ecosystem.
All
yeah,
right.
that's
And
huge. That's
as we
huge.
close off on this conversation, I just want to know, when you look at how these platforms are perceived to the traders, many might argue that this might be another bureaucratic stand.
Mm,
How do you convince entrepreneurs that this initiative is out to build on trade, and what's the
mm, mm, mm.
potential that Africa has in terms of trading with each other, and what's the value of trade?
One of the things that we are doing through the Afreximbank is the on-ground support, on-ground handholding. The reason companies like Fuel Sources Africa exist is to be able to showcase the actual practicality, one transaction at a time. Being able to showcase to the small traders or the importers and exporters that let's start off with one particular transaction, let's start off from a lead, let's get to a deal, and let's continue the same process again and again to just prove the conversation is tangible and it's real. I believe that the trade conversation within the continent is at its best and at the right time. The only thing that we are
Yeah.
pushing and really pushing hard through the Afreximbank and the AFCFTA is to just showcase tangible transaction, tangible demand that has been converted to actual transactions. And that is what the ATG is here to do and to achieve. And by the small bits of transactions, we will be able to get to where we'll be saying that the trade is at 50, is at 60%, but it has to start from being able to handhold one transaction at a time, having agents on board, having the technology in place, having tangible demand, then we can scale it up.
All right. Thank you so much, Felix Chege, for that interesting conversation. And we definitely will be keeping a close watch to see how this builds up.
Hey guys, that was Felix, CEO of Real Sources Africa. So again, it's a market platform, you know, digital platform for to exchange, goods within Africa, SMEs. So all in all, great initiative, and now it's supported by Afreximbank, which is, the African export and export, import and export bank. Strong backing. That entity made almost $926 million in net revenue. I understand that net revenue include interest and amortization costs, but all in all, it's still an impressive number for net revenue for an African entity. So we're gonna keep an eye on Real Sources Africa. I encourage you guys to visit their website if you are interested in some of the products that they're offering, because you have to understand every product on offer. Something I have to mention: every product on offer on that platform on Real Sources Africa is African made. It's not a product that you buy in China and you come sell it onto our platform. So all those products are sourced in Africa. They are created in Africa. So it's definitely a value added for Africans. So here in this community of holders and seekers of African capital, we support platform as such. We support such initiatives because we believe that is for the best for our continent and our economic future. All right, guys, you guys let me know what you think in the comment. Appreciate it reviewing or reacting to this video with you guys. Stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.